Welcome to More Than Legal, the show where we go behind the scenes to uncover the fine print of power, purpose, and profit. I'm your host, attorney Danielle Laughlin. After almost 2 decades in the trenches of courtrooms and boardrooms, I have learned that every move leaves a mark and every deal tells a story. What will we uncover today? Let's find out. Hey, real quick, before we dive into the episode, remember, nothing you hear on this podcast is intended to be legal, financial, or tax advice. I invite you to contact any of the guests you hear by looking in the show notes for their contact information, or if you'd like to reach out to me, you can find my contact information at daniellelaughlin.com. All right, now let's get into it. Hey, welcome back to More Than Legal. This is episode 2. I'm your host, Danielle Laughlin, and today I'm going to give you my secret sauce. That's right. I'm going right into this secret framework that I use to help clients think through big, gnarly problems, big decisions that they struggle to make. Oftentimes in business, there are situations that arise that you haven't dealt with before, or maybe you've dealt with something similar, but not exactly the same, and it's unclear exactly how you should proceed. As a lawyer, my job is not to tell my clients what to do, although they probably think that's exactly what my job is. It's not. My job is to help them understand the circumstances, the laws, the situation that they're in, and give them my experience and guidance as to the choices that they have available to them and the pros and cons and potential upsides and downsides of those choices. That leaves the decision making squarely in their lap. Ultimately, it is the client's decision how they want to proceed in any given situation. A lot of times I get the question, well, what would you do? And I have to be honest and say, I can't answer that. It can be frustrating for a client to hear an answer like that because they're struggling with really hard decisions. And like all humans, they just want an easy way out. They just want an easy answer because it's uncomfortable and it's scary. So when I'm talking through these issues with clients, I'm using this framework, and I call it the legal process. Now, I wish I could tell you that this is some fancy process that I've been formalized and using for years on end, but honestly, it hasn't been formalized until recently. In fact, I formalized the process when I was giving a talk to a group of entrepreneurs, and I needed to help them learn how to make decisions in high-stakes scenarios. That was the purpose of why I wanted to speak with them, so that they could understand how to really think through some of these issues in a way that would help them hopefully get to the right call, even if, of course, it was still scary and uncertain. So I call it the legal process because legal is an acronym, and the letters stand for laws, ethos or ethics, goals, actualities, and liabilities. The reason I want to start off our conversation with this framework is because I believe as you go through the show and you hear different topical conversations or different interviews with experts and other entrepreneurs or investors, you may have a situation that you're dealing with or thinking through, and this framework hopefully can help guide you. So be sure to get the transcript or take some notes so that you can keep this information handy. And we will have a download for you in the show notes. So you can go there and you can find the link for the download if you want to get a written document explaining this process in more detail. So you've got a big decision on your hands. You've got something that's high stakes, and this doesn't have to be catastrophic high stakes. It could be something like whether to hire or fire someone. It could be something like whether to engage with a certain vendor or to maybe acquire another company. These are all big decisions, and of course we all know that they're going to have an impact on our business. So of course they're very important. And when they are going to have an impact on your business, we would consider that high stakes because your business is your legacy, right? This is what you're trying to build for financial freedom, for some purpose, or maybe a combination thereof. So we start first with laws. And this doesn't have to be necessarily, anyway, a statute or a case law. It could be something like an internal policy, it could be a contract provision. But basically, it's the stated rule of what is at stake or what needs to be followed in this decision making. So, for example, if you're dealing with a statute, you can't take the life of another, right? Like that's a murder statute, let's say. Then you have an issue of, okay, you can't take the life of another. That's the rule. But maybe the situation you're in is not very clear. For example, we've heard about like stand your ground laws. In Georgia, we have a stand your ground law. And regardless of how you feel about that from a policy perspective, what you do know is that there are nuances as to when the general rule, don't take the life of another, doesn't actually mean what it says. This is a condition upon the rule. So why do I bring this up? Well, this specific example is one that I think everyone can understand. And the reason that it's really important to use that type of an example here, even though that's not a business issue, is because it's something fundamental that we all understand, and it's something that we've all seen and experienced. If I try to give you an example from a business scenario, it may not be relevant to you, and I don't want to prevent you from understanding this process because I use an example that you're not really familiar with or you haven't encountered or doesn't happen in your business or whatever. So I'm going to use this example. We have the law, don't take the life of another. That's the rule that we are supposed to follow in this high stakes decision. There's an intruder coming into your home. You're in a state like Georgia where you can stand your ground. You can use lawful force against this intruder. There are some nuances here, of course, and I'm not going to try to give you all of them. But, there's things like it has to be reciprocal force. You can't use deadly force if they're unarmed, for example, right? And so we've seen a lot of this play out, obviously, in the news over the past several years. And so you've got this intruder coming in. And let's say it's not clear whether this person is carrying a deadly weapon or not. You don't know. Maybe you're upstairs and they're downstairs. Maybe you don't believe in guns or owning guns, and so you don't even have a gun that you could possibly try to defend yourself with, okay? You are now in a high stakes decision, and it's not very clear what you need to do. This is the framework that you can use. So you know the law, you know the rule, you have a few other steps that you have to take to get to the right choice. And the steps that you take next are all 100% subjective to you, okay? So you are the discerning factor of these next several steps. In this example, at least, in your business, you may have a management team. You may have a board of directors. You might have a few key employees that you consult with when you make decisions. And so you can also use this framework when you're in a group setting. After you know the rule, step one, you have to then go to the second step. And this is where a lot of times there is so much confusion that it becomes difficult to know how to move forward. And that's why I believe that step number 2 is really the most critical step. And it is often the thing that people do not know or understand about themselves or their business, the group that they're in, and it really makes it difficult to make decisions. And that's E. And E, as I said before, stands for ethics or ethos. Why is this difficult? In a future episode, I will go deeper into business ethics and the two competing primary theories of business ethics. I want to touch on it quickly because I want to point out how this can show up in your business decisions, even though we're using a non-business example. In this non-business example, your ethos or your ethics could be things like your religion. You may be a Christian, a Muslim, a Jew. You may not believe that you could take the life of another person for any reason, or you may believe that you are perfectly morally capable of taking the life of this other person for some reason that your religious affiliation provides for you. Okay. So whatever your kind of religious affiliation may be, or maybe you're in some kind of civic club or something, and you're making a decision in that sort of a context, you've got this framework that you work from. And this is really kind of where your ethics come into play. And a lot of times those types of things you're not thinking about because they're kind of ingrained in who you are. In business, on the other hand, there are different rules at play as to what is ethical or unethical. And typically we're talking about the ethical pursuits of a business. What is the social responsibility of a business? What makes a business ethical? And this is the point that we are going to work on with each other at a future episode, like I said, because you will want to develop this ethos if you don't have one. And these are a decision between a stakeholder version of business ethics versus a stockholder version of business ethics. Stakeholder is more about bringing value to everyone involved, thinking through every stakeholder that may be impacted. Stockholder theory is more about focusing on the profitability and the bottom line of the business. We'll talk about the distinctions between those two things at a future date, but generally that's kind of the two ideas. Purpose, people, everybody is important, stakeholder idea, or the only thing that really matters is the bottom line because we need to keep the business profitable. That's the type of ethical decision you have typically in a business scenario, and you have to get clear about your ethics there to be able to use this process for your business decisions. We'll talk about them in the future so you can actually do a good job at that. But for purposes of today, I just want to kind of help you understand that this ethical step here is very critical. You have to have a framework here. You have to have a belief system that you can consult so that you can check your decision or potential decision against those ethics or that ethos that you may have. Once you discern what your ethics say, so you're not supposed to take the life of another, the law says, unless they're intruding upon your property, according to some state laws. Ethically, you don't believe in taking the life of another, okay, let's say. So now your belief system is conflicting with what the law says. Now, the law does not say that you have to take the life of another in an intruder situation. It just permits you to do so under certain circumstances. So if your ethos is telling you not to do the thing that the law says you can do, then though your choice may be legal, it would not be ethical according to your principles to do that. So more than legal, the whole idea behind this podcast is about exactly that. The law may allow you to do certain things, but that does not mean that you have to do those things. You don't always have to take the choice that is available to you. And that's the really critical decision-making point that a lot of people gloss over, and they get stuck. They get really stuck on that. All right, so you know your laws, you know your ethics, and now you go to step 3, goals. What are your goals? What's the goal for this situation? Well, in the example we're using, probably your goal is to stay alive, right? You may also not want to lose your possessions, or you may not want your family harmed or whatever, but primarily you just want to stay alive. And so if you know you want to stay alive, but you're not ethically aligned with taking the life of another, assuming they're bringing deadly force and it's legal to do so, what next? Okay, what next? So then you move to the next step. That's A, actualities. You have to look at what is actually available to you as a resource in this situation. The scenario we're talking about, we've established that you don't have a gun. You're against guns. You don't believe that you could take the life of another, and you don't arm yourself. So you don't have a gun. So even if the person has a gun and you were legally able to use it, you don't actually have one to use it. So unfortunately, or fortunately, however you may look at that, that's not an actuality that you have available. This also trips folks up sometimes. For example, somebody owes you money in your business, a client, somebody's not paying you, and you want to sue them. But if you don't have the financial resources to sue that client, that option is not actually available to you. I hate to break it to anybody out there that's not clear about this, but there's no pro bono collect your money for you law firm that I'm aware of. And if there is, please let me know about it. But if you're a for-profit business and you need to collect money for your for-profit business, you're going to have to pay another for-profit law firm to do that for you. And so even though you may want to pursue that collection, you may not be able to afford to, for example. Okay? So the actualities here are super important, because if you don't have the resource available to you, it's actually not an option for you. And this is another place where people really get tripped up, because they get into the fairness. Well, it's not fair that this intruder's coming into my home because I don't have a gun and I don't believe in taking their life or trying to defend myself with a gun. So it's not fair that they came into my house and then all of a sudden they are losing their ability to think clearly. They're too worried about the fairness of the situation that they've encountered. As adults, we all know that life isn't fair. Same idea when someone owes you money. It's not necessarily fair that they didn't pay you, right? If you did what you were supposed to do, they were supposed to pay for it. So it's not fair that they're not paying you. But the world doesn't care about that. And so the actualities step is really critical. You have to really think about that. You have to really make sure that you're not getting caught up in fairness here, okay? Because you can't control other people. You can only control yourself. You can only control your response. So you have to know what you're actually dealing with from a resource standpoint to know whether you can make this decision or not, okay? And then finally, the very last step, liabilities. If I make this choice, what are the liabilities for making the choice? And on the flip side, if I don't make this choice, what are the liabilities? So going back to our example, if I make this choice not to pursue defense against this intruder, I'm going to be a pacifist here. I'm not going to use force against this intruder. It's against my ethics. I don't actually have a gun, and I want to keep my life, right? So I've decided that I don't want to take any action against them that may jeopardize that. But if I don't take action against this intruder, what will happen? Well, maybe they're going to steal my stuff. Maybe they're going to accost me or my children or my spouse. Maybe they are going to take us as hostages or terrorize us in some way. Okay, there's a lot of, ideas that could probably come up here. Let's not go too far into a rabbit hole, but you get the idea. If you don't take force against this intruder, there are absolutely going to be some liabilities that you're facing. Now, if you go against the choice that you want to make, you feel like this is the right choice for you to be a pacifist in this scenario and not actually use force, then what are the liabilities if you did use force? Maybe you could grab a baseball bat. Maybe you could get to a knife. Maybe you grab a vase or something, that you could kind of knock this person over the head with or something, right? Maybe you're going to call for help, right? That's the first thing you want to do, of course. But how long will it take for them to get there, right? What will happen when the intruder hears the sirens coming at them when they're inside your house? So What if you actually did go against what you ethically wanted to do because you realize that the liability of actually taking the choice that you are ethically aligned with is too high? And so you have a cognitive dissonance between the decision you want to make and the decision that actually would be a better choice because it would reduce liability and prevent potentially further harm, right? That's why you want to go through the whole process, looking at the liabilities of action and inaction, doing the thing that you think is the good choice and not doing that, doing something else or doing nothing at all. If you use this framework and you spend your time staying really focused on each of these steps and thinking through it, which could be a quick process for some scenarios, could be very high pressure like the one we're talking about. I can't guarantee you're going to have, deliberation time to pull out your notebook and start writing things down. But if you kind of use this framework in your mind, it can help you get to those decisions a lot faster. And then when you have pushback, let's say you're in a team dynamic and someone on your team is pushing back on a decision that needs to be made, you're more confident to tell them exactly why the decision is being made that way and all of the steps that you took to make the decision. And more importantly, you can use this framework with your team to help all of you together make better decisions. Okay? So hopefully you find value with this framework. We're going to talk about the legal process more. We're going to go deeper into the ethics. I don't want to bore you and I don't want to give you too much content to chew on right now. What we're going to do is at the next episode, we're coming back and we're going to start talking to our experts. And in between expert conversations, I'm going to come back with some topical discussions, some kind of think on this, chew on this ideas. And hopefully it'll kind of lead into a natural progression of each expert that we talk to. And it'll help you in your business start making decisions that are more aligned with your ethics and get to those decisions faster, rather than trying to search the world for the right answer or what are other people doing or what's fair or not fair. This is a more stabilized and a more, frankly, ethical way of coming to decisions with confidence. And you will see vast improvement in your business when you implement this because you'll no longer stay stuck when you really just need to make a decision and move forward. So I hope you find value in this legal process framework. Next time, we are going to be talking to an expert on finance. You don't want to miss this. This is a brilliant man. His name is Greg Crabtree. He sat down with me. He's written 2 books. He is a CPA, and he breaks it down. He is straight to the point. He's not going to talk over your head. And he's published a couple of books, Simple Numbers and Simple Numbers 2.0. If you don't know about Greg or his books, check them out. We will obviously provide all of that information to you in the show notes on the next episode. But if you could do your homework ahead of time, you might find more value from my conversation with him, especially if you're in a service-based business like me. So I'll catch you next time on More Than Legal. Thanks for tuning in. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to the show. Remember, stay sharp, stay curious, and stay tuned for our next episode. Bye for now.